For my 35th birthday last year, I took a pilgrimage, spending a day and night in each borough of my awesome city. I started in Manhattan, where God reminded me he and I are both storytellers. He confirmed my work by showing me first a recording space for radio violence. He brought scripture to life as I sat in Sheep Meadow, reading about the Good Shepherd. I walked from the Upper West Side all the way down to the Lower East Tenement Museum, where I heard stories of two different women, 100 years apart, who both found solace and provision in garment work. Finally, he led me down to a little bookstore in Fidei, where one unexpected book about heaven, hell, and the afterlife felt as though it had been placed there just for me. I reflected on how God is still writing stories, like mine. On Staten Island the next day, God reminded me what it means to lay down my life. Boats have always been a special me and God thing, and then when I got there, I explored abandoned military fortifications that had never been needed, reflecting on how much we invest in protecting ourselves against imaginary threats. Then I went to a garden I'd always wanted to visit, where I was surrounded by flowers. It's interesting because flowers in scripture actually represent how fleeting life is, and throughout the day I unexpectedly found myself among 3 different 9/11 memorials. I saw the crosses hidden in the wreckage, the names of lost loved ones, and was moved by how determined Staten Island was to memorialize all the lives laid down. Over a meal of lamb, I thought a lot about sacrifice, and by the end of the night, I was sharing my faith with strangers who were seeking friendship and connection at a bar and learning about the sacrifices that their families had made for them. In the Bronx, God showed me that he wastes nothing. Within the span of an afternoon, I walked past heartbreaking poverty, then immediately into unbelievable wealth and privilege. I literally listened as rich people in the gardens talked about not knowing how to spend their money. The contrast was overwhelming, and it grew even more stark in a cab ride past a school with recent gang violence into a very wealthy area, where I got to stay in the guest house of this historic mansion. My rusty French was somehow enough to talk with the family who owned it, and they generously offered me a birthday brew and a ride in their fancy car. It reminded me that God will use every single small thing in my life. In Brooklyn, God reminded me that we're part of a much bigger story. I got to see the Transit Museum, where I learned about the people who risked their lives to build the tunnels of a much more connected city. I finally stood inside the Bluebird subway car, which I wrote about in my seminary mythology of New York City. I got to experience even more flowers connected on vines, and then prayed over a COVID memorial before wandering through Greenwood Cemetery and its beautiful chapel. I prayed among the graves, thinking about all the generations that came before us, and the ones we will never meet who will come after. Finally, I saw some really cool parrots who actually fled to the cemetery to survive as essentially refugees from a ship from Argentina. The night ended at Don't Tell Mama with live music and a sweet reunion with someone I had loved and nurtured for many, many years. It was an awesome night, and it reminded me a little bit of being back in Austin and enjoying live music there growing up. Friday, I returned to Queens. I rode the full, vibrant line of the 7, listening to all the different languages and dreaming a lot about heaven and what it means that all the nations are going to be gathered there. Once I got there, I realized that the museum I planned to visit was closed because of GovBall. And so instead, I reflected more on the different nations as I headed back to Astoria to journal, pray, and simply rest. It was a really funny reminder that the point of a journey is actually always ultimately to reach home, where I would end up staying due to this stupid illness for almost my full 35th year. Even though that's an unexpected setback, for sure, I am grateful that it was not unexpected to God, and my near-death experience was weirdly prepared with a pilgrimage that talked to me every day in each borough about mortality.